Welcome, everyone. Want to thank you for coming, and this is John Ferguson, and he's going to present Beyond the Rubric, Experiential Pedagogy, and Rekindling a Love of Learning.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We doing okay? Have the sessions gone well so far? I haven't been to any of them yet, so okay, good. Well, then I will get us started because we may actually have to end just a little bit early on this one because I've got to go to another meeting. But I do want to make sure we have time because I want to kind of have a discussion at the end of this because I have no doubt that before I am done, in fact, before I'm very far into this, I'm going to piss off a portion of the group. How big of a portion, I don't know. But there will be people who will be irritated based on what I'm about to say. So let me start off, though, giving some sort of context and kind of a framing for how I'm going to approach this and how I've approached classes, at least all the classes I've taught since I've been here at Utah State. Now, I've taught for about 25 years now. 14 of those have been here at USU. And at the beginning of every class, or at the beginning of each semester, I always put up this quote as the opening slide along with playing a song that kind of goes with it. And it's a quote by, and I apologize, my French is really not that good, but Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Any French speakers? Was I even close? Not too bad. Oh, that sounded so much better than what I said. I'm going to practice that for the semester. But it's a translation from one of his works where he says, if you want to build a ship, don't herd people together to collect wood and don't assign them to tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. And that's very much what has motivated a lot of my teaching since I've been here at Utah State and the kind of the way I've tried to teach things. To give you a little bit of background, because I think background's important and it will probably explain some of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute. When I started out, not going to play the song again. When I started out teaching, I came into the academic world from industry. I was an attorney, and as an attorney, I had zero background in how to teach. So I went from being a First Amendment attorney who was doing trainings and filing amicus briefs with the Supreme Court to suddenly being in a classroom. And there was very little transition in all of that. So as many of you who maybe didn't have a whole lot of training, either in your academic programs or maybe you also shifted over from industry, you tend to fall back on the things you know, right? Well, I am not only an attorney, I also happen to be a Baptist minister. So the two things I know, how to talk and how to convince people of stuff. That's really my only skill set. So I relied on that a lot. And I lectured a whole bunch. That was just what I did because that was what I knew. And a lot of that lecture got me a lot of positive feedback because I was a good storyteller. And I had a lot of war stories. And if you have enough war stories and entertaining stories, people will like you. And you'll get good evals. And students will be like, oh, your class is great. And I thought, I must be killing it because all these students are telling me I'm doing so great. And I'm just telling stories. Now, the other thing I was really good at, just because I'm a little compulsive, is I was really good at setting up rubrics, designing grading systems, and making sure that whatever we did, I graded accurately and fairly. And I made sure that the grades were well structured. The problem with all this is that after a while, I kind of hit a bit of an existential crisis because I started to think about what I was doing and how I was doing it. Now, for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to talk about this like it happened all at once. Like overnight, I just woke up and it happened. It didn't. It happened over many years. It was a process. In fact, it's an iterative process that continues to haunt me some days. But in this crisis, I suddenly realized a couple of things. First off, nobody cares about grades. They don't. And I know some of you, as soon as I say that, that bothered you. Like there's something in the back of your mind that you're like, I don't like that. Because you're nerds. I know you are, because I am. And you went through the academic process where grades validated you throughout most of your academic experience. And then you became an academic, and you give grades to other people. So grades have to be important, otherwise a big portion of life that has validated you is kind of meaningless. That was my existential crisis. That is one of the things that I really struggled with, because I was like, grades have to be important. But then I thought about it. And we all know grades aren't important because they're made up. Okay? There's no objective criteria for grades. Think about all the people who teach your same course. Do you use the same grading system? Is one of you the stricter one of you the nicer one? Talk to your students, they'll tell you. And worse than that, they don't really reflect anything. Because I know many students will come into my class and complain about a course they took where they learned nothing in it. They got an A. They couldn't tell you anything about the course. And then another course where it's like, man, this course changed my life. I struggled every day. I became a better person. I saw the light, whatever it is they do. And they got a C in it. But they were like, yeah, but I earned that C. I struggled for that. And that meant something. So, and it's worse than that. We know based on the research that's being done by our career services departments, and you can go talk to your career service department and they'll tell you, it's not just the students who are recognizing that grades don't really matter much, it's also the people who are hiring them. Employers aren't looking at our grades anymore. Sadly enough, based on my understanding of it, they don't trust us. They don't think we're doing a very good job at being rigorous, or I think a lot of them have just also recognized that they're made up. So if you look at the statistics, about 9 years ago, I should put the chart up. I've got the numbers from our career services department. Like 70-something% of employers looked at grades. That was one of the criteria for determining whether they were going to hire someone. Last 2 years, it was 38%, and it's been steadily declining every year. They just don't look at it anymore. They want to see other proof. They don't think grades are a very good criteria. And then the other thing, which hurt me even more based on how much work I'd put into it, also I recognized rubrics were hurting students. And the reason I know this is because I talked to a whole lot of employers. And there's a whole other story here where I had to create this course, and in order to do it in politically appropriate ways where it was going to happen, I had to go talk to a lot of employers to get feedback so we had data we could back it up with. And what we found was what employers were looking for. Let me just ask, number one thing, what do you think the number one thing employers are looking for, both in the research I did and if you look more broadly across the general research?
Someone that shows up.
Actually, that comes in about second or third, which surprised me. What do you mean by competency? It's a definitional issue. It's actually a specific thing they want students to be able to do.
Do the skills that need to be done? Sorry, that's a nursing break.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know some of you are in very aligned sections. So the number one thing employers said they wanted, a student who could critically think, a student who could problem solve. And they said one of their biggest complaints is students are coming out of college and they can't solve a problem. Unfortunately, because we are so rubric bound in what we do, that's what they expect the world to be like. So they'll go to an employer and they're like, well, tell me what to do and how to do it. And employers are like, we can program a computer to do that. We don't need to hire someone and pay you all this money if you can't go out and solve novel and new problems. And they said it's one of the areas students struggle with more than any other area. Then we get into stuff like emotional intelligence, grit, or something along with showing up, those sort of things. Also, communication skills. And I teach in the business school. I'm over here teaching business law and ethics. I'll tell you, business students, they crush it with PowerPoints. They can sell you on anything. Very good with their verbal skills. Can't write to save their lives. I don't even know if they're capable of using AI to write at this stage. Like, it's bad. And your students are going to be in different stages of that, but it's something that's going to be important. So, in order to deal with this, I was like, okay, I've got to find some way of making this real. The other thing I didn't put on here, but the other thing I also realized as I was going through this crisis and kind of trying to figure all this out, my war stories weren't cutting it. It made me feel good because they liked me and they smiled and laughed a lot. They weren't learning anything. And unfortunately, we sometimes go back to the things that validate us and not always look at the things that are actually going to be helping the students. And that can be really uncomfortable. At least it was for me. I shouldn't speak for others. So what did I do? I had to figure out a way to kind of reassess what my responsibilities were in relationship to my students. What was I supposed to be doing? And these are the kind of questions we don't really ask very often in higher education. It's somewhat troubling to me how seldom we ask this. And when we do ask it, people will immediately default to, well, we have academic freedom, so we can't ever talk about this. because that would infringe on someone's academic freedom. Huge fan of academic freedom doesn't mean we don't have to actually have these discussions. So in my kind of sussing through all of this, what I came up with was that I had a duty to help my students understand the world they were going to go into was not as siloed as the one we were educating them in. As you are well aware, our students take classes that are very narrowly siloed. This class is about accounting. Your major is going to be in biology. You're going to read your English stuff. And there is very little crossover with other disciplines, which is insane because there is no place on earth that has the potential for interdisciplinarity. I think I made that word up. As we have right here at a university. Like, I can walk next door and find ag stuff. I know nothing about ag. I hear all the time, we're making spider silk out of goat milk or something. There's an astronomy telescope I can look at. I mean, that's an amazing set of opportunities we have here. And instead of integrating these and finding ways of helping our students see a more integrated world, we tend to just keep getting our little silos more and more narrow. And the reality is it's because of money. That's our funding model. That's the way we get our money. That's the way we spend our money. So it makes sense. It's just not great for our students. It definitely doesn't do the one thing we need our students to do for our own self-interest, which is we need our students to be able to go out and solve wicked problems. Because the reality is we created many of those wicked problems. We have left them with what they have to deal with. They inherited our problems, and now they've got to be the ones to figure out how to solve it. I figure the least we could do is give them the tools to help them out. Again, maybe it's just me. Going back to what they're going to need in life, that critical thinker aspect. And then another big part of it, as I was thinking back on this, was not only to help them become learners, help them be more curious, but also foster a desire to learn. Make them want to be curious. Make them want to learn things, not just because I tell them to or because I give them an assignment, but what can I do to spark that kind of innate sense and drive to want to learn and to be curious in life. So, having no background or experience or training in all of this, I leaned back on the one thing I did know, which was my own experience in college. Thinking back to your experience when you're in college, do you remember, were there things that like really landed? Stuff that really worked? And stuff that you know that really didn't work? I mean, I know the things that didn't work because for mental health reasons, I will never ever do what was done to me in a Pascal programming class. Yes, I am old enough to know what Pascal programming is. It's a computer language that no one ever used, but certainly don't use anymore. I took that as a night class on a Monday night for 3.5 hours, and the professor read the textbook to us for 3.5 hours. Attendance was mandatory. I am a pacifist. I am not a violent man. But I was tried. I was tested in my beliefs in those nights. On the other end of the spectrum, I think of the things that really did impact me, the things that I stick with me to today, that I still think about to this day. And a lot of it goes back to one of my professors who was way ahead of his time and may have been insane, but he was my mentor. I was his TA. I was in the honors program. I worked for him. We were very close to this guy. And one of the things he did was every one of his classes, didn't matter what it was. He taught a lot of political science. Didn't matter what the class was. Everything was created in a fictional universe. Now, again, we're talking about a spectrum here. I'm really good at lecture, and that was my background. But I began to learn, and I've done some research. There are actually companies now that refer to it as edu-LARPing, where you are playing your education. I'm not going to do dress up. I have limits. I have some integrity left, and I'm not going to play dress up. But I remembered my professor from back in college, that's what he did. Whether he called it that or not, that was what every one of his assignments were. The context for every class was this idea that we were going to put it in some sort of created universe. So if it was a law class and we were learning about the Constitution, he would break the class up and every group was a law firm. And you had to do stuff in that law firm. If it was a political parties class or whatever, you had to break up into political parties. Now, I know as adults and master educators and people who've done this for a long time, that seems kind of silly. I mean, it seems like, oh, that is infantilizing, or we're not in high school anymore, they should just toughen up and learn to lecture, learn to accept the lecture. But the more I thought about it, the more I recognized it's not that these kids are fooled. They don't think that they're in a law firm. They understand it's play acting, but it does help them recognize the connection between what we're teaching them in class and the realities of the world that they're going to have to go and function in. And I don't know why it works, but I know it does. I know it worked for me, and I've seen it work over and over in my own class. And so the one caveat to this, though, and I'm going to talk more about what this kind of contextualizing fantasy worlds we create with our education in our classes, but I also want to point out one of the big problems I see with these sort of conferences, and I've been to so many of these, is every one of these conferences, someone will give a keynote or someone will say, and it's like, we have to do all this, and you have to go all into whatever the thing is for this year. Do we have any education majors in here? Or education majors? Anyone teaching in education? That's why I haven't thrown anything yet. Good. In education, they have to go every year, and they have to do in-service in the school, and it's always the new thing, which is really just the repackaged thing from last year. But you have to throw away everything you did before, and we have to do this thing now. So often, that's kind of the approach I think people kind of push. As someone who really thinks maybe a little moderation might go a long way, I still lecture in my classes. It's something I'm good at. Students like it. I try and be more useful with my lectures. I try and make them more targeted, but I still do it. But then I also mix in this other stuff. In order to do the things that we're learning about over this day and in these sessions, doesn't mean we have to get rid of all the good stuff we're doing. It means we just add in some more new things that might make our educational experience and the experience for students a little bit better. So I really tried to bring in more of the ideas and the activities that the professor had shown me and that I did with him, and I recognized it addressed many of those goals. It really was hitting on a lot of the things I remember from my own experience and I've seen with my students since then. Students are way more invested in their learning. I'm going to talk about kind of how I do this in my class in just a minute, but one of the things we do in this class is at the end of the course in my class. It's a business law and ethics course. They've created a business all semester long, and they've had to do various things to the business. And at the end of it, they have to sell me their business. They have to create this portfolio, a sales portfolio, and they're trying to convince me to buy their business that they've created all semester long. And I was like, I thought that was very clever. I'm so proud of myself. So I'm like, I'm so clever. Until about 3 years ago, I had a group of students, and they were like, no. It's like, it's not an option. I wasn't asking. I said, here's the assignment. They're like, we don't want to do that assignment. We're not going to do it. And I'm like, it's weird. Explain it to me. Why aren't we going to do this assignment? And they're like, this is our business. We built it. Blood, sweat, and tears. They were so proud of their, and they're like, we're not going to sell. I'm like, it's made up. All right, you get that this is fictional. And they're like, we don't care. We've worked too hard. So I've literally had to modify my final project for this class. So now they have the option. They can either try and sell me their business, or they can convince me to be an investor to invest in their business if they are that proud of it. So you do sometimes have unintended consequences when you try out new things, and they react far weirder than you expect them to. But it's the joy of working with 20-year-olds. It definitely deepens their connection to the materials we're learning about, but one of the things, being very selfish, that I found beneficial in all this was it diminished the nagging parent syndrome that I have had to deal with more and more over the last few years. The more that I make them rely on their own drive and make them solve their own problems, the more I've just lost the word, maybe having a stroke. Self-reliant, yeah, thank you. Oh my God. I don't know if I can smell peanut butter. All right, so they become more self-reliant, and I had to do less of the, did you get your stuff done? Did you turn it in? Did you? Weirdly enough, they started respecting the rules of the class a lot more. I had a lot fewer students who were emailing with the, can I turn stuff in late? Can I, not have to do this? All the things that I've noticed a real increase in some classes, and based on talking to colleagues over the last couple of years post-COVID. But the more I've done this, the less I've had to deal with that. And I like that. So how I've created this, and this is just an example. I'm going to go real quickly over this because it is not something that's going to work in your classroom. But I want you to see kind of how I've done it in mine, and then maybe you can find ways of incorporating this sort of thing in your classroom environment. First off, we meet 2 days a week. It's either a Monday, Wednesday class or a Tuesday, Thursday class. They have a reading and a quiz that is due by Sunday night, and then Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday, we spend Monday, or the first day, Monday or Tuesday, where we will have a lecture. And I say lecture, really it's half lecture, half discussion. I'm still attorney enough that I'm very Socratic in how I do a lot of that. So my lectures tend to be more discussion-based. And then on the second day of the week, we apply it. So we have some sort of in-class activity or some sort of thing that we are doing. Now, like I said, the way I do this is the beginning of the semester, they get in a group, they create a business. And every week, whatever it is we do that week, that's what their business has to do. So when we talk about contracts, they have to make a contract that week with another company in the class. When we do employment law, they have to hire or fire somebody. So it's always something directly connected to what we're talking about. And whatever the assignments are, whether it's the assignments they have to do in the group or the individual assignments, a lot of the ethics assignments are more individualized. Whatever it is, I never give them an assignment. In fact, I don't even use that language when I'm in class. What I do is give them a problem. Here's your problem. How are you going to solve that problem? And in order to solve that problem, they have to figure it out because I don't give them a rubric. Oftentimes, I give them very little guidance. I'm like, well, here's a problem. In the real world, when you leave here, what are you going to do when you're confronted with a new problem? Because you're not going to know how to do it. So how are you going to figure it out? They are incredibly upset by this, especially the first few weeks. I get lots and lots of emails, sometimes from their parents, which is always delightful, about how horrible this is and why can't you just tell them what they're supposed to do. And what I try and tell the parents, I usually don't tell the students till later in the semester, is I don't give them a rubric. I don't tell them how to solve the problem, because if I do, they will never be better than me. The best they're ever going to do is whatever I give them. And, all right, some of them are never going to be as good as me. But it's amazing, the ones that are out there, where I find, oh, you're way better at this than I am. I'm glad I didn't restrain you with my idea of what the right way to do this was, because they came up with novel and incredible ways of doing things. They don't like it in the beginning. By the end of the semester, they really like that. That's one of the things they're most excited about. So having that kind of structure, and then at the very end, they have to kind of take all the things they've done all semester and they put it in this portfolio and they're trying to sell me their business or get me to invest in their business. What I found was the students really, really like it. And we'll talk about how I know whether or not this is working kind of at the end of this presentation. But the things that I think are really important in this, and I think back to my own experience, and I think about the experiences I've had as I've been using this, is students need to have, or at least they need to perceive, first off, a sense of ownership. They need to have a sense of ownership of their assignments. They need to have a sense of ownership of what they're learning in the class. They need to have a sense of ownership of their education. And so whatever I can do in this structure or whatever else where they feel it's theirs, they are much more excited and much more interested in making sure those things work and make sure they're invested in those things. I need to give them creative possibilities. This is a tough one. I'll be honest. This is tough because the more creative they get, the more work we have to do. Right? It's not easy to grade creative stuff. But again, and I will never say this in public, please don't ever tell any of my students I said this, the grades are made up. So I see grades as a tool. And I use them to make students work a little harder sometimes. Because this class is it's one of our core classes, so everyone in the business school has to take business law and ethics. And so I have a pretty wide range of students in here. For the 80 students I'll have in a classroom, some of them, they came here because they failed out of other majors, and this is like, oh, this is the last hope we've got. Some of them are like, no, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to be the next Elon Musk, and I'll do whatever I have to. Some of them are super geniuses. I mean, a couple of weird ones, weirdly smart. That's a pretty big range when they're in this class. And so if I were to have a standardized grading system, The A top student, they're never going to do anything here. They don't have to. I mean, they'll, 10 minutes and they've got all the assignments done. The struggling student, they'll give up. They're like, this is too hard. I can't do it. So I definitely fake the grades and use them to motivate the students to do whatever they need to. The good, I know some of you are like, oh, that's going to create lawsuits and, there's potential for liability there. There is huge potential for liability. The only saving grace I've got is by the end of the semester, they don't care about their grades either, at least most of them. And that's the one thing they're like, oh yeah, we didn't really worry about that as much. Otherwise, I would be in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of ambiguity because I don't give them a rubric and I don't tell them how to do things. That ambiguity, while it's very frustrating in the beginning, it feeds into those creative possibilities later on as we go through. And there has to be a real possibility of failure. I am astounded every semester by the number of students who come into my class and will say, well, I turned in the assignment and I did all the things I was supposed to, so I should get 100, right? I should get all the points. And I was like, no, you met the bare requirements, minimum requirements of the assignment. That's a C, that's average. You did what you were supposed to. Had you not done that, you would have failed. Most of these kids have never failed because if they do, they complain and we get tired of hearing that. So lots of times, I know in my experience, I'd rather just pass them through. I don't want another call from their mother because she's mean. She hurts my feelings. But without that possibility of failure, there's no skin in the game. And they're not going to be nearly as invested. So those are just some of the basic things, irrelevant of the context, irrelevant of how you set it up in your class or in your situation. You need to have some of those things in order for the students to really be engaged with it. So again, like I said, any assignments I have, they're always problems to be solved. I never have a checkbox. I never have rubrics. I never have any of those things because they're not going to have those later in life. I don't want to be encouraging that behavior now. I try to be as respectful as I can with creativity. And sometimes that's hard, because sometimes they think they're being creative, and really it's just bad, like real bad. Like no one would ever accept that. And so sometimes we have to have some hard conversations. And we have to be like, well, I understand you're being creative, but is your boss or your investor, or in some cases, we're talking about relationships, is your spouse or family member going to put up with that kind of creativity? Or are you just being toxic and kind of a dick? And sometimes those are hard conversations for some of the students. Some of them are. And lack of directions, these are features, they are not bugs. Okay, this is great, I've done this for a long time, but me standing up here saying, this is great, you should do this too, kind of irrelevant, because I am one data point. Just because it works in my situation doesn't mean it'll work anywhere else. And how do I even know if it's working? It's a real question. I ask myself that almost every day. So I had to figure out a way, since I don't use grades, and grades are always the easiest way to tell if what we're doing is working. Because we're like, look, there's a number, there's an objective criteria, I'm good. I get my gold star, and we get validated by that. Or we do things like we can do student evaluations. Student evaluation, they're great for me. I'm an old cisgender white guy. They tend to go in my favor. I know there are lots of problems with student evaluations. Recognizing that there are problems and there are biases in those student evaluations does not mean we get to discount them. And I'm a huge advocate for student communication and student speech, students being able to advocate for themselves. And one of the ways they can do that is through their evals. Now, we need to do a better job helping them know how to use evaluations, because they're not good at it. And we're not really good at using it either, let's be honest. I don't know how many of you have this experience, but every semester I will get my evals and I look through them, and I'll be honest, I have really good evals. I have the highest evals in the business school. And despite that, I will get 99 positive evals, and one eval just hates me so much. And I will fixate on the one. I'm like, why didn't they like me? They thought my tie was ugly. What's wrong with my tie? My ties are great. It's not healthy. It's not even what evals are supposed to do. And so I would also recommend don't use the numbers on evals. And that's hard because your department chair and your promotion committee will be looking at those numbers, but those numbers are as fake as the grades we give. All right, those kids don't have any criteria for objectively understanding how to grade us, so they made those up. What can be helpful is the qualitative assessment, the comments they make. And the good news is I used to actually make my TA go through, and I taught them how to do qualitative analysis, and they'd have to read through all my comments, and they'd have to put it in categories, and I'd make it into something I could make a little more objective, which they just loved that. AI does a pretty good job of it. If you plug all of your comments into AI and have it spit out, you know, summarize these, what are the good, what are the bad, what we do to improve, all that sort of stuff. I compared it to what the TAs were doing, so I kind of compared it to the team. It does a pretty good job, I'm not going to lie. And it does it in about 45 seconds as opposed to that poor TA having to spend 3 days doing it. And through those comments that they give us, they can give us a lot of good information. You have to sift out all the stuff like, I didn't like how her voice sounded, or I think he's bald, or you know, the stupid stuff we get. You sift that out, but you can start to see patterns. And we can see how we can, whether or not what we're doing is effective. How is it landing? The other thing, and this one's tough, we do a little bit of this by having our colleagues come sitting in our classes and evaluate our classes. The problem with that is those are a little stilted. One, because we don't always teach exactly the same way when we've got one of our colleagues staring at us as we do any other time. But the other problem with that is our colleagues lie. They're not going to say, oh, you suck. They're going to be like, you did some great things. Here's some, I mean, we're all very businesslike in a lot of this, and sometimes that's not as helpful. But we've got to find a way of making it more helpful because our colleagues are the ones who know what we're doing. They know it better than anyone else. They know it better than the students. Collectively, they will know whether or not we're being effective or not in how we're teaching. But the other area where it isn't just them sitting in and watching your class, it's also your reputation with your colleagues. Because students talk about you, and they talk about you to your colleagues. And when they do talk to you about you to your colleagues know or have some sense of how you're doing. And we need to find better ways of tapping into that. It's a really weird conversation, like going in, what are students saying about me? Am I good? It sounds needy. Sounds like a rom-com or something. But we need to find effective ways of doing that because that information is more data we can use, and it's a little better filtered in some ways because it's filtered through other people who know what they're doing. And then the big thing, this is my biggest one, or at least the one I think is the most valid, did it work for our alumni? When they leave, do they say, hey, that was effective. I actually still use that. I remember that. That changed me. I now approach things differently. Those are really valuable pieces of information. And the other thing is with alumni, sometimes they'll come back and they're like, yeah, you shouldn't have done. They're weirdly blunt about some things, but they're really helpful about others. So finding ways to get those alumni relationships and those alumni responsibles, super helpful. The downside is, here at USU, we have terrible tracking of our alums. Across the board, every college. We're just not good at it. And we've tried. We try so hard. Here in the business school, they do everything other than just send them cash in order to get them to reply back and let us know where they are and how they're doing. And maybe we did send them, I don't know, who knows, but it's not really working. So finding ways of keeping some sort of relationship with alumni. I was at another conference about 3 weeks ago, and I was talking about the same topic, and some people were like, you know, do you do LinkedIn with your students? Do you find other ways to kind of circumvent the school system? Because some students, when they leave, they're like, I paid all that money, I'm never talking to that school again. You know, they get weirdly angry about the school. But finding ways of staying connected with those people can help.
We do a really great job. I'm connected with our alumni from 12 years ago. We hear from them all the time. We connect with them all the time, but we do it outside of the university system.
You have other networks?
We do it, and it's really nice.
What area?
Dietetics.
Dietetics.
Well, just our program. Just our program.
Oh, just your program.
Just our program.
Not even your area.
No, just our program. Just the 3 of us.
Oh,
Yep.
you're drawing that circle smaller and smaller every time. It's
What do the 3 of you do to keep in touch?
yeah.
Like, we do lots of things. We do things that are a benefit to them, like, sending out job postings all the time based on, like, our our students are across the country as well. Send out job postings all the time, send out interesting things, send out articles, but then ask them for things. We just engage them regularly, and then it makes it a lot easier. And then I always give them the option, like, hey, if you're tired of hearing me, just tell me and I'll take you off. I think 3 people out of 700 graduates have asked, like, take me off the list. Then they'll send us job postings. We're connected on LinkedIn.
How do you get emails for them? Because they lose their USU email at some point.
Well,
So
we also collect non-USU. So we collect non-USU emails at graduation.
like, you can have your diploma as soon as I get your email. Like,
I mean, pretty much, kind of, yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. I'm just wondering the legality. But
No, I mean, literally, we collect non-university-based emails before they leave our program, and we have them and we use them regularly, and they stay really engaged. Not all of them, but a large. And we're, they're sending us wedding announcements, baby pictures. They're staying engaged.
We do the same thing in our program. We ask for their information before.
so nursing and dietetics.
Healthcare providers.
Healthcare. What are the rest of you doing? No, I'm just kidding. All right, good. So yeah, finding ways of doing that. Do you ever ask them about if they use the stuff they learned in the program? Do you ever get feedback on what was good?
Well, for accreditation, we have to collect those outcomes. So we have survey data as well.
Yeah, we all do accreditation though, and I know how we collect that data. So I'm talking about useful stuff that you would actually change in your class. Because I mean, ours, it's always, I don't know how you guys are doing your accreditation. Ours is like, do a first day, last day quiz and see if they improved or whatever. And it's like,
I wish our accreditation was like that.
That's not how
Healthcare
ours is.
program accreditation is a little bit more.
so healthcare stuff, you guys have different criteria.
We also use evaluations within our courses that are outside of IDEA.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's also helpful because we get real feedback, not that other stuff.
Does anyone else, any other areas use non-IDEA surveys like middle of the semester, check-ins, anything like that? What area?
I teach anatomy.
Anatomy. Man, what, the human body is collecting it all over here. What are you healthcare people doing in here? I can't wait to see you guys all go set up your own doctor's office, and for the semester, so you guys have different criteria though as well because of the areas you're in. I mean, anatomy, pre-med students, yeah, pre-health, okay. So yeah, that's definitely going to affect the way you do it. For the rest of us common people, the plebes among us, we have to be more creative. Or we need to follow your model and get better about it. Okay, that is all I had. I just wanted to present that. I'm not saying you should do any of this. I just wanted to provide this as one example of what I have done and why I think it's effective. Whether it will be effective in your particular context, I don't know. I can imagine there are some it won't be. But I think there's a lot where it can be. And based on discussions I've had with other people in a variety of other disciplines, I think it's a fairly malleable approach, especially when we look at it as based on principles of what we're trying to teach our students and how we're trying to educate our students versus maybe some of the things that we've traditionally just kind of fallen into. Does anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts? Want to share your hopes and dreams?
Can you talk a little bit, it seemed like you were doing up division, and it seemed like you were working with students that were a little bit further along. You could give them a more complex project as kind of the goal for the semester. What about lower division, where it's pretty cut and dry, they just need to learn some fundamentals? What are your thoughts on this approach for some very basic gen ed type stuff?
Well, my class is the equivalent of the business school's gen ed because it's the core curriculum they all have to take. So it's usually they take it their sophomore year, so it is usually earlier. I think it's actually easier to do it in those contexts because there's a set knowledge bank we're trying to make sure they have absorbed in some way and are using, and finding creative ways of having them use it. That's why I break the class down where we lecture and we discuss topics or whatever it is we're supposed to learn that week on the first day, and on the second day they have to use it. Them having to use the specific knowledge or the thing we're going over, sinks in better. They tend to connect to it a lot better than if I just tell them about it. How to do that, again, varies a great deal depending on what you're like. I don't know how, if I were teaching the math 2000, whatever, I don't know how I would do that, if this would work. If I were teaching an English class, I know I would use this. If I were teaching history, I don't know, I'd try a lot of different things. Anything else? All right, thank you all. I'm giving you 5 minutes back. If you have any questions or if there's anything you want to discuss further, anything to help with, this is my email. Please feel free to contact me. Other than that, I hope the rest of the sessions go well today. Thank you.